HOA Karen beat my disabled girl half to death on a sunny afternoon while other parents watched in horror. My daughter's screams echoed across the playground as expensive heels crushed her ribs. That monster smiled while my baby bled. She had no idea the storm coming. I would destroy everything she built. Before you watch full story, comment below from which country are you watching. Don't forget to subscribe for more amazing stories. The autumn sun cast long shadows across Meadowbrook Elementary's playground as 12-year-old Emma Martinez sat alone on the accessibility ramp, her wheelchair positioned carefully beside the oak tree. Her fingers traced the pages of her favorite book, lost in a world where she could run and dance like the characters she loved. Emma had cerebral palsy, and though her body didn't move the way she wanted, her mind was sharp and her heart was pure. Emma didn't notice the expensive silver Mercedes pulling into the parent pickup area 30 minutes early. She didn't see Patricia Whitmore, the most feared woman in the Meadowbrook Heights HOA, stepping out of her car with fury blazing in her eyes. She didn't know that Patricia had just left an HOA meeting where another parent had dared to suggest that the community playground should have accessible equipment for disabled children. Patricia Whitmore had spent 20 years building her reputation as the Queen of Meadowbrook Heights. She controlled everything with an iron fist. Her rules were absolute. Her word was law. And she had made it very clear that she didn't want those kinds of people lowering property values in her perfect community. Now, as she stared at Emma sitting peacefully on the ramp, something inside Patricia snapped. Here was everything she hated. A disabled child, taking up space, existing where Patricia believed she had no right to exist. Patricia marched across the playground, her designer heels clicking against the pavement like gunshots. Emma looked up, confusion crossing her gentle face. "You," Patricia hissed, her voice dripping with venom. "You disgusting little burden." Before Emma could respond, before she could even process what was happening, Patricia grabbed her wheelchair and shoved it violently. The chair toppled backward, and Emma crashed onto the concrete ramp. Her head hit the ground with a sickening crack that echoed across the empty playground. But Patricia wasn't done. Years of hatred and cruelty erupted from her like a volcano. She kicked Emma in the ribs, her expensive heel connecting with the child's fragile body. Once. Twice. 3 times. Emma's screams filled the air, but the teachers were all inside, and the playground was isolated. "This is what happens when people like you invade our community," Patricia snarled, grabbing Emma's arm and twisting it viciously. The snap of breaking bone was audible. "You're worthless. You're a drain on society. You should have never been born." Emma's small body convulsed with pain and terror. Blood pooled beneath her head. Her broken ribs made every breath agony. Her wrist hung at an unnatural angle. Patricia stood over her, breathing hard, her perfectly styled hair slightly disheveled. She looked down at the broken child and felt nothing but satisfaction. Then she heard footsteps running toward them. Mrs. Peterson, the art teacher, had heard Emma's screams from her classroom window. She ran faster than she had run in 20 years, her phone already dialing 911. Patricia smoothed her hair, adjusted her designer jacket, and prepared her story. By the time Mrs. Peterson reached them, Patricia was kneeling beside Emma, fake tears streaming down her face. "Oh my God, I just found her like this," Patricia wailed convincingly. "She must have fallen from her wheelchair. Someone call an ambulance." But Mrs. Peterson had seen everything from her classroom window. And she would never forget the sight of Patricia Whitmore beating a helpless disabled child. Maria Martinez's world shattered when she got the call. Her hands shook so badly she could barely drive to the hospital. When she burst into the emergency room, a doctor intercepted her before she could reach Emma's room. "Mrs. Martinez, your daughter is alive, but she's in critical condition," the doctor said gently. "She has 3 broken ribs, a severe concussion, internal bleeding, a fractured wrist, and significant trauma. We're doing everything we can." Maria's knees buckled, and a nurse caught her before she fell. "Who did this to my baby?" Who would hurt Emma? The police officer standing nearby shifted uncomfortably. Mrs. Martinez, we have a witness who says Patricia Whitmore attacked your daughter. But Mrs. Whitmore claims she found Emma after a fall. She's already hired 3 lawyers and is threatening to sue the school, the witness, and anyone else who accuses her. Maria's grief transformed instantly into white-hot rage. She knew Patricia Whitmore. Every parent in Meadowbrook Heights knew Patricia Whitmore. The woman was a tyrant who had terrorized the community for years with her hateful rules and vicious enforcement. That monster, Maria whispered, her voice deadly calm. That evil monster put her hands on my child. Mrs. Martinez, the officer said carefully, Patricia Whitmore is extremely powerful. She has connections to the mayor, the school board, half the lawyers in town. She's already spreading a story that Emma fell and hurt herself. Without concrete evidence. Then we get evidence, Maria interrupted, her eyes blazing. I don't care how powerful she thinks she is. Nobody touches my daughter and gets away with it. Nobody. She walked into Emma's hospital room and nearly collapsed at the sight. Her beautiful baby girl lay in the bed, tubes and wires everywhere, her small body broken and bruised. Emma's eyes flickered open, and tears immediately began streaming down her face. Mama, she whispered through cracked lips. The mean lady from the HOA meetings. She said I shouldn't exist. She said I was disgusting. She hurt me so bad, Mama. Maria held her daughter's hand carefully, mindful of all the injuries. I know, baby. I know. But she's never going to hurt you again. Mama promises. That woman is going to pay for every second of pain she caused you. Mrs. Peterson sat in the police station, her hands wrapped around a cup of cold coffee. She had taught at Meadowbrook Elementary for 30 years, and she had never been more terrified in her life. I saw everything, she told Detective James Walker for the 3rd time. I was closing my classroom window when I heard shouting. I looked down and saw Patricia Whitmore attacking Emma. She pushed the wheelchair over, kicked the child repeatedly, and twisted her arm until it broke. It was deliberate. It was vicious. It was evil. Detective Walker nodded, writing everything down. Mrs. Peterson, you understand that Patricia Whitmore will come after you with everything she has? She's already threatening lawsuits. I don't care, Mrs. Peterson said firmly, though her hands shook. That child almost died. I'm not going to let that monster get away with it just because she's rich and connected. What Mrs. Peterson didn't know was that Maria Martinez had been busy. In the 24 hours since the attack, Maria had made dozens of phone calls. She had contacted a lawyer who specialized in cases against powerful defendants. She had reached out to every family Patricia had ever bullied or harassed. She had called news stations, advocacy groups, and civil rights organizations. And she had called her brother, who worked in the school district's IT department. Maria, I found something, her brother Carlos said over the phone. The playground has security cameras. They captured everything. Patricia attacking Emma, the whole thing. But Principal Howard already deleted the footage from the school's server. Maria's heart sank. So we have nothing. I didn't say that, Carlos replied with a grim smile. The school system upgraded to cloud backup 6 months ago. The footage automatically uploads to a secure server that Principal Howard doesn't have access to. I can get you that video, but you need to move fast. If Patricia finds out about the cloud backup, she'll find a way to destroy it too. Get me that video, Maria said. And Carlos? Thank you. You might have just saved my daughter's life. 12 hours later, Detective Walker sat in a dark room watching the security footage. His jaw clenched tighter with every second. The video was crystal clear. It showed Patricia Whitmore approaching Emma, the violent attack, the brutal beating, and the calculated way Patricia had positioned herself to look like a concerned bystander when Mrs. Peterson arrived. We've got her, he said quietly. We've finally got her. News of Patricia's arrest spread through Meadowbrook Heights like wildfire. The woman who had terrorized the community for 2 decades was finally being held accountable. But Patricia didn't go quietly. From her jail cell, she made phone calls, called in favors, and threatened everyone who dared speak against her. Her lawyers filed motions, demanded bail, and tried to get the case dismissed. That's when something unexpected happened. The community fought back. Families who had suffered under Patricia's tyranny for years suddenly found their courage. They came forward with stories of harassment, discrimination, and abuse. A father testified about how Patricia had called Child Protective Services on him because his autistic son's stimming behaviors disturbed the neighborhood. A mother shared how Patricia had tried to force her family to move because her daughter used a wheelchair and Patricia thought it was unsightly. The stories were endless. Patricia had destroyed lives, torn apart families, and spread hatred throughout Meadowbrook Heights for years. And now, finally, people were speaking up. Maria organized a community meeting at the local church. Over 300 people attended, filling every seat and spilling out into the hallways. Patricia Whitmore nearly killed my daughter, Maria said, her voice echoing through the silent room. But Emma wasn't her first victim. She's been hurting people for years, hiding behind her money and connections. Well, no more. We're going to stand together. We're going to tell the truth. And we're going to make sure she never hurts another child again. The applause was deafening. Among the crowd was Janet Rodriguez, a prosecutor who had been looking for a way to take down Patricia Whitmore for years. She approached Maria after the meeting. "I want this case," Janet said simply. "I've watched Patricia destroy good people for too long. Let me help you get justice for Emma." Maria shook her hand gratefully. "Then let's bury her." While Patricia sat in jail awaiting trial, Maria turned her attention to Meadowbrook Elementary. Principal Howard had enabled Patricia for years, deleting evidence and protecting her from consequences. It was time for that to end. Maria walked into the school district's central office with her lawyer, 3 reporters, a representative from the Department of Education, and a thick folder of documentation. "We're here to discuss the systematic failure of Meadowbrook Elementary to protect disabled students," Maria's lawyer announced. The superintendent's face went pale. Over the next 2 hours, they presented evidence of years of discrimination, harassment, and abuse that had been ignored or covered up. They had testimony from 12 families. They had emails showing Principal Howard deleting complaints. They had proof that the school had violated federal disability rights laws dozens of times. Principal Howard deleted security footage of a violent crime, the lawyer said coldly. He obstructed justice to protect Patricia Whitmore because she donated money to the school. That's not just unethical. It's criminal. The superintendent looked sick. "What do you want?" "We want Principal Howard fired immediately," Maria said. "We want a complete investigation of the school's treatment of disabled students. We want new policies, new training, and new leadership. And we want it in writing, or we'll see you in federal court." They got everything they asked for. Principal Howard was terminated that afternoon. The school board issued a public apology. And Meadowbrook Elementary began the long process of becoming a truly inclusive school. But Maria saved her most powerful move for the school itself. She called a mandatory assembly for all students, teachers, and staff. Standing on the auditorium stage, with reporters' cameras rolling, Maria held up a photo of Emma before the attack. A beautiful, smiling girl with bright eyes and a joyful expression. "This is my daughter Emma," Maria said. "She loved this school. She loved learning. She loved her classmates. And one of your community members decided she didn't deserve to live." She held up another photo. Emma in the hospital, broken and bleeding, tubes and wires covering her small body. Gasps echoed through the auditorium. Some students began crying. "Patricia Whitmore did this," Maria continued. "She beat my 12-year-old daughter and left her for dead on your playground. And some of you knew she was capable of this kind of hatred. Some of you heard her cruel comments about disabled people. Some of you laughed along with her jokes. Some of you enabled her cruelty. The silence was suffocating. Emma is alive, but she will carry these scars forever. She has nightmares. She's afraid to come back to this school. She asked me if she deserved to be hurt because she can't walk. That's what your silence created. That's what happens when good people do nothing. Maria's voice broke, but she forced herself to continue. I hope you remember this moment. I hope you remember Emma's face. And I hope that the next time you see someone being cruel to a vulnerable person, you find the courage to speak up. Because your silence is violence too. She walked off the stage to complete silence. Then, slowly, one student stood up and began clapping. Then another. Then another. Within seconds, the entire auditorium was on its feet, applause mixing with tears and shame and resolve to do better. 8 months after the attack, Patricia Whitmore finally faced justice. The courtroom was packed with community members, reporters, and families who had suffered under Patricia's cruelty. Patricia sat at the defense table in an expensive suit, her face a mask of arrogant defiance. She truly believed she would walk free. She had money, lawyers, and connections. She had beaten the system before. But this time was different. The night before the trial, Maria had barely slept. She lay in bed staring at the ceiling, thinking about everything that had led to this moment. Emma sleeping peacefully in the next room, finally feeling safe after months of nightmares. The community that had rallied behind them. The evidence that couldn't be denied. She thought about all the times Patricia had terrorized families in Meadowbrook Heights. The single mother who was fined $5,000 because her lawn wasn't the exact shade of green Patricia demanded. The elderly veteran who was threatened with foreclosure because his American flag was 2 inches larger than HOA regulations allowed. The young couple who were harassed for months because their adopted son from Ethiopia didn't fit Patricia's vision of the right kind of neighborhood. Patricia had ruled through fear for so long that people had forgotten what it felt like to stand up to her. But Emma's attack had changed everything. It had shown the community that Patricia wasn't invincible. She was just a cruel woman who had gotten away with too much for too long. Now, as Maria entered the courtroom and took her seat, she felt the weight of every family Patricia had hurt. This trial wasn't just about Emma. It was about justice for everyone who had suffered under Patricia's tyranny. Prosecutor Janet Rodriguez stood before the jury. Ladies and gentlemen, you're going to see something today that will make you sick. You're going to watch a grown woman attack a helpless 12-year-old disabled child. You're going to see her beat this child, break her bones, and leave her bleeding on the ground. And then you're going to hear Patricia Whitmore's own words about why she did it. The security footage played on large screens throughout the courtroom. Several jury members gasped. 2 started crying. Patricia's smug expression finally cracked as she watched herself on screen, seeing her own cruelty displayed for everyone to see. The defendant claims this was a misunderstanding, Janet continued. She claims she was trying to help Emma. But the evidence tells a different story. We have the security footage showing a calculated, vicious attack. We have a witness who saw everything. We have Patricia's own text messages to friends where she called Emma a disgusting cripple who should be put down. The courtroom erupted in shocked murmurs. Patricia's lawyer objected, but the judge allowed the messages as evidence. Then came the victim impact statements. Maria approached the podium, Emma beside her in her wheelchair. The little girl had insisted on being present, wanting to face the woman who had hurt her. Patricia Whitmore looked at my daughter and saw something to destroy, Maria said, her voice shaking with emotion. She didn't see a child. She didn't see a human being. She saw someone she thought was less than, someone she thought didn't deserve to exist. And she tried to erase Emma from the world. Maria's tears fell freely now. Emma has recovered physically, mostly. Her ribs healed. Her wrist healed. Her head healed. But the psychological damage? That may never heal completely. My daughter wakes up screaming from nightmares. She's terrified of strangers approaching her wheelchair. She asked me if God made a mistake when he made her disabled. She's 12 years old, and she wanted to know if she deserved to be beaten and broken. The jury was crying openly now. Patricia Whitmore is a monster, Maria said firmly. Not because she made a mistake. Not because she had a bad day. But because she looked at an innocent child and chose violence. She chose hatred. She chose cruelty. And she felt no remorse. Even now, sitting in this courtroom, she feels no remorse. Emma wheeled herself forward to the microphone. Her small voice somehow carried through the silent courtroom. Mrs. Whitmore hurt me really bad, Emma said simply. But she didn't break me. I'm still here. I'm still Emma. And I want everyone to know that people with disabilities aren't worthless. We're not disgusting. We're not burdens. We're human beings who deserve to be treated with kindness and respect. Emma looked directly at Patricia. I forgive you, Mrs. Whitmore. Not because what you did was okay. But because I don't want to carry hate in my heart like you do. I hope someday you understand how wrong you were. There wasn't a dry eye in the courtroom except for Patricia's. Her face remained cold and unmoved. The jury deliberated for 2 hours. When they returned, every single one of them looked directly at Patricia with disgust and anger. On the charge of aggravated assault on a minor, how do you find? The judge asked. Guilty, the jury foreman said. On the charge of child endangerment? Guilty. On the charge of hate crime enhancement? Guilty. Count after count, the verdicts came back the same. Guilty. 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 Patricia's face finally showed emotion, shock and fear. The judge looked at Patricia with cold contempt. Mrs. Whitmore, in my 30 years on the bench, I have rarely seen such calculated cruelty. You targeted a vulnerable child because of your own hatred and bigotry. You showed no mercy, no compassion, no humanity. You nearly killed Emma Martinez, and you felt no remorse. The judge paused, letting the words sink in. This court sentences you to the maximum penalty allowed by law. 20 years in state prison with no possibility of parole for 12 years. Additionally, you will pay full restitution for Emma's medical expenses, therapy costs, and punitive damages totaling $3 million. Your assets will be liquidated to pay this debt. Patricia finally broke. She screamed and lunged toward the Martinez family, but bailiffs quickly restrained her. As they dragged her from the courtroom, she shouted vile insults and threats, but her words held no power anymore. Her kingdom had fallen. Her reign of terror was over. Patricia Whitmore's life imploded spectacularly. Her husband divorced her immediately and got full custody of their other children. Her friends abandoned her. Her social standing evaporated. Her HOA position was eliminated. Her house was sold to pay Emma's restitution. In prison, Patricia discovered that inmates have a special hatred for people who hurt children. She was isolated for her own protection, spending 23 hours a day in a small cell, alone with her thoughts and the weight of her crimes. Meanwhile, the Martinez family began the long process of healing. Emma returned to school, though it took months of therapy for her to feel safe. The school had transformed under new leadership, becoming a model of inclusive education. Maria quit her nursing job to become a full-time advocate for disabled children's rights. She traveled across the state sharing Emma's story and fighting for stronger protections and policies. The Meadowbrook Heights HOA underwent a complete transformation. Patricia's cronies were voted out, and new leadership created policies focused on inclusivity and community support rather than exclusion and punishment. They installed accessible features throughout the neighborhood and created programs to support families with disabled members. 2 years after the attack, Emma stood on a stage at the state capitol. At 14, she was addressing the state legislature about a bill to strengthen protections for disabled students. "My name is Emma Martinez," she began, her voice steady and strong. "When I was 12, Patricia Whitmore beat me and left me for dead because she thought my disability made me worthless. But I'm here to tell you that she was wrong. Dead wrong." The legislators leaned forward, captivated. "This bill will require schools to have specific policies protecting disabled students. It will create serious consequences for administrators who ignore bullying or discrimination. It will ensure that no other child has to experience what I experienced." Emma's voice grew passionate. "Patricia Whitmore is in prison now, where she belongs. But there are people like her everywhere, people who think disability is something shameful, something to hide or eliminate. This bill sends a message that we won't tolerate that hatred anymore." When Emma finished, the entire chamber rose in a standing ovation. The bill passed 3 weeks later with overwhelming support. It became known as Emma's Law. 5 years after the attack, Emma Martinez, now 17, sat in the waiting room of the state prison. She had requested this meeting, though everyone had tried to talk her out of it. Patricia Whitmore entered the visiting room in her prison uniform, looking nothing like the powerful woman who had once terrorized Meadowbrook Heights. 5 years in prison had aged her dramatically. Her expensive clothes and perfect hair were gone, replaced by a tired, broken woman. They sat across from each other in silence for a long moment. "Why did you come here?" Patricia finally asked, her voice hoarse. "I needed to see you," Emma said quietly. "I needed to see if you understood what you did." Patricia looked down at her hands. 5 years of mandatory therapy and isolation had forced her to confront her crimes. The defiance was gone. The arrogance was gone. All that remained was shame and regret. "I understand," Patricia whispered. "I was a monster. I was filled with so much hate and fear that I couldn't see your humanity. I looked at you and saw only something different, something that scared me, something I wanted to destroy. I nearly killed you because I was broken inside." Tears streamed down Patricia's face. "I've spent 5 years thinking about that day. About your face when I hurt you. About your screams. About how close I came to murdering an innocent child. There's no punishment severe enough for what I did." Emma studied the broken woman before her. "Do you really understand? Or are you just saying what you think I want to hear?" Patricia looked up, meeting Emma's eyes for the first time. "I understand. I destroyed my own family. I destroyed my life. I nearly destroyed yours. All because I was too weak and hateful to see that different doesn't mean less. You were never worthless, Emma. You were always valuable, always deserving of love and respect. I was the worthless one. I was the burden on society. And I'll spend the rest of my life knowing that I'm the monster parents tell their children about." Emma sat quietly, processing Patricia's words. She could see genuine remorse, real understanding, true regret. "I forgive you," Emma said finally. "Not because you deserve it. But because carrying hatred was hurting me more than it was hurting you. I forgive you so I can be free." Patricia broke down completely, sobbing into her hands. "Thank you. You're showing me more grace than I ever showed anyone. You're a better person at 17 than I ever was in my entire life." As Emma left the prison that day, she felt a weight lift from her shoulders. The woman who had nearly killed her was just that, a broken, hateful woman who had destroyed herself with her own cruelty. Emma had survived. Emma had thrived. And Emma had won. 10 years after the attack, Emma Martinez stood in her office at the Unbreakable Foundation, the non-profit organization she had founded to protect disabled children and fight discrimination. At 22, she was a recent law school graduate and a nationally recognized advocate for disability rights. Her mother Maria worked alongside her as the foundation's director. Together, they had helped hundreds of families fight discrimination and get justice. The foundation's walls were covered with photos and awards. Emma's law had been adopted in 12 states. 3 schools had been named after Emma. Her story had inspired documentaries, books, and a movement. Patricia Whitmore remained in prison, serving her 20-year sentence. She had become a model prisoner, teaching other inmates to read and participating in every rehabilitation program available. She wrote letters to Emma occasionally, always apologizing, never asking for forgiveness or early release. Emma rarely responded, but she kept the letters. They reminded her that even the cruelest people could change, though change didn't erase their crimes or entitle them to redemption. On the 10th anniversary of the attack, Emma returned to Meadowbrook Elementary for a special assembly. The school had been completely transformed, now a model of inclusive education with state-of-the-art accessibility features and a zero-tolerance policy for discrimination. Emma wheeled onto the stage to face hundreds of students, teachers, and parents. She paused for a moment, looking at the familiar playground where she had almost lost her life. The oak tree still stood where it had always been, but now it had a memorial plaque that read, "In honor of Emma Martinez, a symbol of courage, resilience, and the unbreakable human spirit." The school had planted a garden around the tree, filled with flowers in every color imaginable. Students called it Emma's Garden, and it had become a place where kids went when they needed peace or comfort. Teachers brought classes there to talk about kindness, inclusion, and standing up against bullying. As Emma looked at the garden, she remembered the scared 12-year-old girl who used to sit by that tree reading books and dreaming of a world where she belonged. That girl had been broken on this very ground. But she had also been reborn here, transformed from a victim into a warrior. 10 years ago, I was beaten and left for dead on this playground, Emma began, her voice carrying across the silent crowd. Patricia Whitmore tried to destroy me because she couldn't accept that disabled people deserve to exist. But I'm still here. And I'm thriving. She smiled at the audience. Patricia thought my disability made me weak. Instead, it made me strong. It taught me empathy, resilience, and determination. It showed me my life's purpose, fighting for people who can't fight for themselves. Emma's voice grew passionate. That woman is in prison, exactly where she belongs. But the real victory isn't her punishment. The real victory is that I refuse to let her hatred define me. I chose to live. I chose to fight. I chose to make the world better instead of bitter. The applause was thunderous. Students held signs reading, "We love you, Emma," and "Unbreakable forever." After the assembly, a small girl in a wheelchair approached Emma shyly. She couldn't have been more than 7 years old. "Miss Emma," the girl whispered. "Some kids were mean to me yesterday. They said I was weird because of my chair. But my mom told me about you. She said you're strong and brave. Can I be strong and brave too?" Emma's eyes filled with tears. She knelt down to the girl's level and took her small hands. "You already are strong and brave," Emma said gently. "You're here. You're living your life. You're being yourself. That's the bravest thing anyone can do. Don't let anyone make you feel like you're less than amazing." The little girl hugged Emma tightly, and Emma felt the full weight of her journey. The attack, the pain, the recovery, the fight for justice, the years of advocacy, it all led to this moment. To being someone that scared little disabled girls could look up to and find hope. 15 years after the attack, Patricia Whitmore sat in a prison therapy session, now 65 years old and eligible for parole in 3 years. She had served 12 years of her 20-year sentence. The prison had changed her in ways she never thought possible. The woman who had once terrorized an entire community now spent her days teaching literacy classes to other inmates, many of whom had never learned to read properly. She volunteered in the prison library, organized book clubs, and mentored younger inmates who reminded her of her own daughter Brittany. Every morning, Patricia woke up and looked at herself in the small metal mirror in her cell. She barely recognized the person staring back. Gone was the perfectly styled hair, the designer makeup, the expensive jewelry. In their place was a woman with gray hair, weathered skin, and eyes that held deep sadness and regret. Her cellmate, a woman named Rosa who was serving time for drug charges, had become something Patricia never thought she'd have, a real friend. Rosa didn't know about Patricia's crime at first, but when she found out, she hadn't judged her. Instead, she had asked Patricia a simple question: who are you now? That question haunted Patricia every day. Who was she now? Not the HOA queen. Not the wealthy socialite. Not the woman who thought money and power made her better than everyone else. She was just Patricia, a broken woman trying to understand how she had become a monster. "How do you feel about your parole hearing?" her therapist asked. Patricia shook her head. "I don't know if I deserve parole. What I did to Emma Martinez was unforgivable. I nearly killed a child because of my own hatred and fear." Over 15 years, Patricia had been forced to confront every ugly truth about herself. The bigotry, the cruelty, the abuse she had inflicted on countless people. She had taken classes, attended therapy, and slowly, painfully, become someone different. "I think about Emma every day," Patricia continued. "I read about her accomplishments. She's changed laws, helped hundreds of families, become an incredible advocate. And I nearly destroyed all of that because I was too hateful to see her value." The therapist nodded. "You've made genuine progress, Patricia. But progress doesn't erase harm." "I know," Patricia whispered. "Nothing I do will ever make up for what I did. Even if I spend the rest of my life helping others, it won't undo the pain I caused. But I have to try. It's all I have left." Meanwhile, Emma Martinez, now 27, sat in a television studio preparing for an interview about her new book, Unbreakable, a story of survival, justice, and hope. "Emma, Patricia Whitmore is eligible for parole soon," the interviewer said. "How do you feel about that?" Emma considered the question carefully. "I've spent 15 years healing from what she did to me. I've built a life I'm proud of. Whether Patricia Whitmore is in prison or not doesn't change my value or my purpose." She paused. "I believe in rehabilitation. I believe people can change. If Patricia has genuinely transformed, if she's no longer a danger to society, then the parole board should consider her release. But she'll have to live with her crimes for the rest of her life, just like I'll live with the scars she gave me. Do you think she deserves a second chance?" Emma smiled sadly. "I think everyone deserves a chance to change. But second chances don't erase first actions. She nearly killed me. That's forever. If she gets out, she'll have to rebuild her entire life from nothing. That's her consequence. My consequence was learning to live with trauma and pain. We both got life sentences, just different kinds." 20 years after the attack, Emma Martinez stood before Congress, testifying about the Americans with Disabilities Act amendments she had helped craft. At 32, she was a renowned civil rights attorney, author, and activist who had changed disability law across the nation. Patricia Whitmore had been released from prison 5 years earlier after serving 17 years. She lived in a small apartment in a different state, working at a nonprofit that helped formerly incarcerated people reintegrate into society. She had never tried to contact Emma again beyond a single letter apologizing one final time. Emma kept that letter in her desk drawer, a reminder that justice isn't just about punishment, it's about transformation, both for victims and perpetrators. Maria Martinez, now 55, had retired from the foundation but remained active in advocacy. She spent her days gardening, writing her memoir, and marveling at the incredible woman her daughter had become. On the 20th anniversary of the attack, Emma returned to Meadowbrook Heights for a dedication ceremony. The community had built an inclusive playground in her honor, featuring accessible equipment for children of all abilities. Standing before the crowd, Emma looked at the children playing together, kids using wheelchairs, walkers, crutches, and nothing at all laughing and playing together without seeing barriers. 20 years ago, Patricia Whitmore tried to teach this community that people like me didn't belong, Emma said. Today, this playground proves she was wrong. Disability isn't something to fear or hate. It's just part of human diversity. And when we create spaces where everyone belongs, everyone benefits. Emma watched a little girl in a wheelchair race her friend down an accessible ramp, both children shrieking with joy. She thought about the 12-year-old version of herself, broken and bleeding on a different playground, wondering if she deserved to exist. That little girl had survived. That little girl had become someone who changed the world. Patricia Whitmore had tried to destroy Emma Martinez. Instead, she had created a warrior, an advocate, a force for justice that would echo through generations. And in the end, love and resilience had triumphed over hatred and cruelty. The woman who beat a disabled girl half to death had spent 17 years in prison, lost everything, and lived with permanent shame. The mother who turned the school into chaos had become a legendary advocate who changed laws and saved lives. And the disabled girl who almost died had become unbreakable. That was the real justice. That was the real victory. That was the end of Patricia Whitmore's story and the beginning of Emma Martinez's legacy. This story is dedicated to every disabled person who has faced discrimination, cruelty, or violence. You are not less than. You are not broken. You are not burdens. You are valuable, you are worthy, and you belong.